Hello, hi, it's Henry the computer guy, and welcome to our lesson number 32. And in this lesson, we are actually going to be talking about the gaming input devices. Remember, we are still talking about the input devices, and these ones help us to feed data into our computer. So, depending on the type of data they help us to enter or feed into the computer, we also made groups into them. And today, we are actually talking about the gaming input devices. What are actually gaming input devices? What do they mean? So gaming input devices are those devices that are specifically designed for playing or controlling your computer games. You have any game you want to control or play, you will need what we call a gaming input device. Let's look at some of the examples and we shall actually try to talk about each of these devices in general. We have the gaming keyboard, we can have the gaming wheel, we have the joysticks, we have the game pads, we have the light guns, we have the dance pad, we have the motion sensing game controllers. Actually, some of them are not new to you because you actually use them at your homes. So now we're actually going to be picking one by one and actually give a brief, let's say on them. We continue. And we're going to begin with what we call the gaming keyboard. The gaming keyboard typically includes programmable keys so that gamers can customize the keyboard depending on the type of game that they are playing. And at times, they light up so that keys are visible in all lighting conditions. So if you have any game that you want to, let's say, control, instead of using your keyboard, your computer keyboard, you can actually opt for what we call a gaming keyboard. We come to number 2, which is the light gun. And the light gun is specifically used to shoot targets and move objects after you have pulled the trigger. So if, let's say, that person who likes games for actually shooting, then you'll have to opt for what we call a light gun. Then we have what we call a joystick. And a joystick specifically has a stick that pivots on the base. It has also buttons that are also used to control the game. For example, if you have those games that need some extra movements, then you'll need to opt for what we call a joystick. Then we have some motion sensing game controllers, and these actually allow the user to guide on-screen elements by moving the handheld input device in predetermined directions through the air. So that means that you're going to control your game from a far distance. You don't actually have to touch it, but they will actually sense the movement of the hand. Let's say if you're wearing it in your hands, then it will control the type of game that you are playing. Then we have what we call the gaming wheel. And at least I think many of you have seen this one before. And it's actually a steering wheel type input device. And users can turn the wheel to simulate driving a vehicle using programs on a computer. For example, those people who always need this Need for Speed, the Run, and other games that are actually for driving, then you'll have to opt for what we call a gaming wheel. Then we can also have a gamepad, and that is actually the most common because you actually use them on your PlayStation console. So you need to control any game onto your game console, then you'll have to opt for a gamepad. So these are specifically some of the gaming input devices we have actually given. We continue. Let's talk about the audio input devices. What do audio input devices help us to do? So they are telling us that audio input is the process of entering any sound into the computer, such as speech, music, and sound. So if you want to enter sound into a computer, then you'll have to go for what we call the audio input devices. So to enter sound into a computer, it must have a sound card. So for any computer to give out sound or to allow or accept sound, then it will have to be having what we call a sound card. Let's look at some of these devices. We can have a microphone, we can have a tape players, we can have the CD or DVD players. Then we can have the MIDI, which is the musical instrument digital interface devices. These ones are actually used to connect those electronic guitars, electronic keyboards, and others. Then we can also have what we call the dictaphone. Let's also try to look at them in at least detail. Let's begin with what we call a sound card. And the sound card is specifically help us, or it is slotted onto what we call a motherboard to help us, for example, to enter sound into a computer. For you to be able to put sound into a computer or get out sound out of a computer, it must have what we call a sound card. So this is how it looks like. Then we can come to what we call a dictaphone. And this was used in earlier days, for example, to record someone's speech. And it can be played at a later time. They are not in existence now, but they were used in older days to record speech. And we have what we call a microphone. It is that instrument used for converting sound waves into electrical energy variations, which may be input into the computer. For example, you have your presentation, you want to put sound there, then you'll need a microphone. For example, I'm delivering a lesson to you. It is a presentation, but I put in sound. So this sound is actually got by that microphone that you're actually saying. Then we have what we call the musical instrument digital interface. Remember, I told you that these ones are specifically used to connect those, for example, devices onto a computer. The electronic guitars, electronic keyboards, so they will help us to connect all those devices, and they can produce the sound which is always audible to us. We continue. Then we talk about what we call the biometric input devices. Why do we call them biometric input devices? Remember, biometric comes from two words. We have bio and metric. Bio meaning life and metric meaning measurement. And these devices specifically target a person's physical characteristics. Are we together? So let's look at what they are telling us here. They're saying that a biometric device translates a biological personal characteristic into a digital code that is stored or compared with a digital code stored in the computer. So they are specifically dealing with a person's characteristics. For example, let's look at these devices. We can have what we call the fingerprint. Remember, they are different for everyone. Even if you're twins, or even if someone is your mother, your father, all your fingerprints are not going to be the same. We have the face recognition system. They scan the entire face. Then we have the hand geometry systems. They scan the entire hand of the person. Then we have the signature verifications. These are specifically used to verify someone's signature. Then we have the iris recognition system, whereby these ones are specifically used to scan the iris of the eye. So whenever you want to, for example, access a building, you can use, this is one of those ones. Your fingerprint, you put it there, then they will scan it and either give you access or not. You can have the signature verification, and that's how it looks like. Then we have the face recognition. It's going to scan the entire face of someone, then proves whether you're authentic or not. Then we can have what we call the iris recognition, and it scans the iris of the eye. Remember, they are always different. We have the hand geometry scanner, and you put your hand there, then they will scan all of it, which is there. We continue. And we also have other specialized input devices. For example, they are telling us that there are many other special input devices that are used for doing special customized tasks. Some of them include, we have the remote control. You're at home, you're using a remote to, let's say, change the channels of your TV. It is an input device. So they're telling us that remote control devices emit a beam of infrared light which carries data signals. They are commonly used with some of our TVs that we have at home. Then we have the sensors. And they're telling us that chemical responses to physical environment or movement can be converted to electrical signals by devices known as the sensors, which input them to the computer for processing. Various sensors can be used to measure the heat, the light, pressure, acidity, and others. For example, if let's say if I've ever gone in some of the bigger buildings, for example, where they put some of the tags that you're not supposed to be smoking in a certain area, and you start smoking, then it will detect the smoke. Then either it gives an alarm that someone is actually smoking from this area. So those are some of the sensors. They react according to what is happening at that moment. So a remote, that's how it looks like. So let's continue and talk about what we call the methods of data input. And they're actually telling us that a person must carry out some form of action in order to provide input information into a computer. So you have to take action, or you have to take part as you're entering data into the computer. So they're telling us that various devices and techniques have been developed to allow this. Are we together? So we continue. Let's talk about them. And we have the first one, which is the keyboard input. And an example is actually the keyboard. So specifically the keyboard input, and it is by far the most commonly used method, where people get the keyboard, then they start typing and all that. So that is the most commonly used method. Then we have what we call the natural language input. And an example can be the voice recognition devices, whereby, for example, if you're in a computerized car, you can say radio on, then it puts on the radio. You can say lights off, then it puts the light off. That means that this method involves speaking into a microphone connected to the computer. So it will do exactly what you want it to do. Then we have what we call the touch input. And in most cases, the touch screen has been the most example of this one. And it is the simplest kind of touch interface that has been in use. So there are others. For example, devices which are actually sensitive to that. We can have the smartphones or touch screen. Then we can have the tablets. They all use what we call the touch input. Then we have what we call the movement input, which is, for example, the joystick. That has been mostly the step for the movement input. Though there are other devices that have actually been made. For example, some of the sensors have been made, and you're moving your hands in the air. They control or enter data into the computer. Then lastly, we have what we call the pointer input. And actually, this is the classic pointing input device is actually the mouse. Though, even other devices like the trackball are being used. So you can use one of these methods as you're entering data into your computer. So it's been Henry, the computer guy. Thank you for watching. And if you're new to my channel, I please urge you to subscribe to it. And if you have a friend, you can help me share the link to those people who actually need this. Bye-bye. Let me see you in the next video. I sign out.